Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is your guy Keenan Lambert, and in this video we're going to talk about something that hits at the center of my existence. Here we go.
Si tú quieres que la vida te sonría, si tú quieres que la vida te vaya bien, sé feliz, damos, mira, y verás que todo puede suceder. Haz las cosas de corazón, deja a un lado el rencor, grita fuerte al exterior, saca del pecho.
There are limited avenues for young men here in Cuba to make money, so they turn towards the informal economy. I've had in-depth conversations with my boys about my future, how I'm going forward, and something that I really want is a child. It doesn't matter if it's a boy, a girl, I just want a healthy child at this point in my life. I'm ready to be a father. Now, some of my boys have said, hey Keenan, why don't you just drop off a kid in Cuba, keep it pushing, and go ahead, just take care of the kid, send money for the kid, take care of him, and that'll be that. I can't do it. Now, on the one hand, it would be easy work, right? You just send money to take care of the kid, go back every now and again to look after the kid. But something that I notice here in Cuba, just like in other places, is that the individuals that grow up in single parent households, they have it the worst. Specifically for the young boys here in Cuba, it almost feels like they have no options, no opportunities to move forward, unless they have a cousin in Miami who can give them that initial investment to start a business and move on from there. The kids here in Cuba really don't have many prospects. For the kids that are growing up here in the urban ghettos that I frequent, that I enjoy, I noticed that it's almost like they go from baby to being a hustler, okay? So they're a cute kid and then they get into their pre-teenage years and then they're hustling in order to make ends meet. What I noticed in some tourist corridors here in Cuba, you have these young men that are hustling. And what it could look like is a young man essentially latching himself to a tourist. But instead of charging a price up front, the tourist is unknowingly paying commission at every stop that they go to. So for instance, they go to a restaurant, okay? So the restaurant, in some cases, may give that tourist a different menu, one with higher prices. And after the tourist pays the bill, then the young man at some point, maybe during the same day, maybe later on, maybe at the end of the week once everything is tallied up, okay, they receive a commission from that restaurant, from that business. And I've also seen it happen in barbershops as well, where they're trying to charge individuals double the price, okay? And in that doubling of the price, the barber keeps some, and then the hustler keeps some. Now, Cuba is a super inexpensive place, but if you like nice things, you're gonna have to be willing to obtain money. Okay, now for young women have options. Young women can go ahead, they can work in restaurants. They tend to be more attractive as tour guides. Okay, whereas young men, not so much. Okay, a young man as a tourist guide is gonna have to be very, very good, right, in order to lure tourists in and be willing to do business with them, when they can instead go to a woman, right, who's very much visually pleasing. If it's not direct, like a direct sort of pimp relationship, I've seen in some cases individuals who have long-standing marriages, okay, and the wife will go out and will look for tourists to meet, okay, and then have relations with tourists. Meanwhile, their husband is at home. He knows everything, okay, he knows everything, and he just keeps tabs on his wife just to make sure she's safe, but she has full reign to do whatever sexually with tourists. For me, okay, that's something that I couldn't do. No matter how poor I am, I would have to find some way to work my ass off. No diddy, right? But I have to find a way to work and earn money. Okay, in this society, the individuals that earn the most money are the cab drivers, taxi drivers, the ones that drive from the airport and back. into Havana, they end up making some of the most money here in Cuba, and they oftentimes have nice houses in Miramar, in Vedado. Similar to how I've seen in Jamaica, okay, there are a lot of young men here that are 100% willing to go with a tourist woman. They actually look for tourist women when they're in popular corridors like Calle Obispo. Okay, they're out there, they're looking for young tourist women, in some cases maybe a little bit older, right? Maybe not a 10, right? But you know, they try to catch those 4s and 3s, maybe with low self-esteem, maybe a little bit overweight. Okay, they lyrics these young women, okay, make them feel nice, right? And then they form relationships that have financial benefit. Meanwhile, all the while, they have their local relationship here, okay? And you know, that girlfriend that is here is cheering them on, hoping that young man gets to go to foreign, okay, abroad. And then eventually he can go right ahead and send for his girlfriend. And then once he sends for his girlfriend, they can melt off into that Cuban community that is within that particular nation or a neighboring nation. My Canadians, unfortunately, you guys know about this maybe the best. Okay, you go ahead, you deal with the young lady, you bring her back to Canada, and then after a little while she disappears and she ends up in Miami. Okay? There are few and far in between the options for young men to make money, so they turn towards the informal economy in order to start up. But sometimes I look into the eyes of children and I see that joy, that spark, the same one that I had growing up. But I look at them and I wonder, okay, at what point is economic need going to take away their innocence, going to rob them of that little twinkle that they have in their eye that we don't as adults have anymore? And in some cases, low-key, I think that there are some young Cuban boys, young Cuban men who hate tourists. Okay, tourists move around with a freedom and essentially with a weird right to the women here, right? Just because of the money, the greenbacks that we have in our pockets, okay? So say maybe they're not even greenbacks because you switch into the local currency, okay? But still, tourists have an economic power and they're able to command the young ladies, and that, at their core, bothers the young men that are here. I've had conversations with them about that. Whatever you do, stay away from Sky Green Restaurant here in Havana. They are notorious for having guys from off of the street lure tourists in, sitting down and eating with the tourists, and them getting charged something like double or triple or whatever it is. Okay, now this is something that's widespread across Havana, but one that is notorious for doing this is Sky Green Restaurant. Okay, I once ran a little, I wouldn't say it was an experiment, but I knew what I was getting myself into when a guy took me to a bar, and then at the bar, they overcharged me a little bit. Okay, maybe double, but 2 drinks, all right? So I didn't really pay that much money. But I wanted to go through the experience, that way I could talk about it, okay? And then towards the end, right, even after I gave him $10 on top of the little con, right, he was still saying, oh yeah, we should go to Sky Green Restaurant. Sky Green is good, okay? There are these little scams that they go on with, right? And when you openly scam people, right, it indicates that you don't have respect for them. So for me, when I'm working with locals on videos and we're doing things, I'm very, very particular on who I have surrounding me, okay? Any individual that screws other people will potentially do it to me as well, okay? So, and then there's gonna be that Miami Cuban in the comment section that blames communism, that blames the Communist Party, that blames socialism for what has happened here in Cuba. And I would say that it is not the systems that are responsible for the social erosion that has happened. I would say it is the introduction of petty capitalism, okay? Cuba, as I've said in other videos, is on that starter level, that first level of capitalist development. And because they're on that first level, right? There are situations that they need to work out, okay? They were essentially fast forwarded into an economy, an open market economy, right? For which they couldn't compete, right? So you have individuals who are just trying to get up to speed. When there was more of an iron fist here in Cuba, you saw less of the things that you're seeing today, okay? Now, this video is more so applicable to the kids that are growing up here in some of the tougher areas. When you go out to Miramar, when you go out to Vedado, those are individuals, in some cases, that have connections, okay? With those connections might be abroad, right? Or here locally to the upper class that allows them opportunities to earn money in ways that kids here in Central Havana, without those social connections, without those connections to abroad, right, that those kids don't have. I had a young lady who's living in the Middle East reach out to me. There are some Cubans who actually made it out to the United Arab Emirates and are living there and doing business, working there. Now, she ended up getting in a relationship with a guy, a trainer, okay? Then he decided that he wanted to go back to Cuba, okay? And then while in Cuba, their connection got a little bit rocky, okay? Connection meaning that he wasn't reaching out every day. They weren't talking every day. They're talking maybe once a week, right? And during that time, he went and impregnated his ex-girlfriend, right? Which he described as something of an entanglement, nothing serious. And then their connection just continued to wane even further after that. Now, as this child is born, and their connection is basically broken, right? He's attempting to circle back to use her as a financial resource. Mind you, the woman that he impregnated is his ex-girlfriend. Yeah, okay. So the sister reached out to me to ask, hey, Keenan, do you think that I should step away from this situation? And my answer was absolutely, right? Very clearly, he doesn't have respect for her, okay? And he's using her, right, in order to, keep him financially afloat while here in Cuba. Okay, now, again, these are the things that men may feel forced to go on with in order to earn some money. The biggest industries here in Cuba are tourism, okay? It may not, directly be in working in a hotel. It may not, being something like a flight attendant or something like that. No, that's not the way how it works here in Cuba. It is those feeder industries that feed off of tourism, okay? Transportation, right? The restaurant industry, clubs, the art scene, etc. Okay, when there's more tourists here, there's more dollars flying around. When there's more dollars flying around, Cuba has the resources to then go and take those dollars, those euros, those pounds, and buy things abroad. Okay, and then bring them into Cuba for consumption, because Cuba does not produce things in the way that they should. Okay, amazing fruits and vegetables, right? But outside of that, right, Cuba, what are we producing? What are we producing? And these are fruits and vegetables that end up staying here, right? So they don't bring in that foreign currency, right, that Cuba so desperately needs. When I look into the eyes of these young men, and all I feel is a sense of disappointment, because I know that the society is essentially stacked against them. Okay, the guys out in Vedado, the guys in Miramar, their parents will take care of them. The ones here in Central Havana, it's rough. It's rough. Last night I actually went out to a club and I saw a young man who was pimping out his girlfriend. Okay, or I think he has literally a harem of young women. It doesn't present anything like what you would expect a pimp to look like. Okay, but he's essentially trying to get her a date with a foreigner. Okay, and I'm friends with a guy. I'm good with a guy that's good with him, right? And this young lady is going ahead doing her work, I guess giving this young man some commission off of it. Okay, and he's essentially quarterbacking the exchange, if you will. Okay, That's something that I saw go on in the middle of a club last night. Imagine you meet a tourist that doesn't speak a lick of your language, and you start the process of him developing a sexual relationship with your girlfriend, the individual that you are intimate with. I couldn't do it. I could not do it, my friend. And these same men that I'm talking about who are growing up in these financially hurt areas, in many cases, they grew up in single households where they're seeing their mothers and maybe even their grandmothers engaging in this, this sort of trade, okay, prostitution. So me coming from a Jamaican place of thought or an American place of thought, maybe I'm putting too much judgment upon them, okay, because it's already normalized within, this little tight space. It's normalized within their families. It's normalized. They've seen their mothers go with tourists, right? So maybe it's normal. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Aquí le otro palo.